27th of June, 2020, and we're going to be looking at 8 ways to change unwanted behavior. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada ki jai. Again, today we're going to examine 8 different ways that we can change unwanted behavior. And this is going to be looking at how to change bad behavior in ourselves, or generally somebody over whom we have some authority, our students, our children, maybe our employers. To some extent, how we can influence the bad behavior of others in general. However, we should be careful to note that we don't generally have the ability to affect much of a change in the bad behavior of people who are not receptive to us. At one time when I taught this, someone asked me, how do I change the bad behavior of my friend's husband? And I said, I don't know if that's within our power, although we may be able to affect it to some degree. So we're going to look at 8 different ways of changing bad behavior that's been identified in modern psychology. And we'll notice that each of these is used by Krishna. We can generally say that the first 4 ways we're going to look at, we could call somewhat negative, and the last 4 ways we could call somewhat positive. Only the last way is ultimately fully spiritual, But as we said, all of these are used by Krishna himself. And all of them are effective in certain situations with certain kinds of bad behavior and certain people. If we were to say that one of them is better than the other, that would not be very accurate. It's more a question of saying that some of them work better in some situations and some work better in other situations. We're studying this so we can have more tools at our disposal to helping with, again, our bad behavior or the bad behavior of those who are close to us. So for each of these, we're going to be looking at how this is applicable to ourselves and to others and how Krishna uses it. So these are the 8 main ways we can destroy the situation, use punishment, use negative reinforcement, use extinction or patience. Those 4 are considered somewhat negative. Then to train an incompatible behavior, to put the bad behavior on cue, to reward small steps of the absence of the behavior, and to change the motivation, which ultimately means we're changing the rasa from material to spiritual, although that can be used on a material level also. And those 4 are considered, again, positive ways. But again, I want to emphasize that each of these 8 are used by the Lord, and they are all applicable in different situations. So the first way is to destroy the situation. This particular way of stopping bad behavior is very popular. And often when a person is having a problem with bad behavior in themselves or others, they jump to this solution as their preferred or first solution. However, we should note that while the solution is appropriate in some cases, it usually comes with some sort of serious consequence. So this kind of solution is making a very big change in one's life, changing one's job, changing one's location, changing one's ashram. One may go from the brahmachari ashram to the grihastha ashram, or from the grihastha ashram to the brahmachari ashram. One might change to another place. You move out of your place, you move to another home, or you move to another country. Sometimes a little less drastic is, you get rid of a piece of furniture, or maybe you throw away your phone. You're spending too much time on your phone, so you get rid of your phone. Or I have one friend, she was spending too much time on her phone, so she got a very, very small phone with a short battery life so that she could only spend a half an hour on her phone at a time. Or people who get phones that don't have a data connection, for example. So they just destroy the situation. You could think of it like if your house is dirty and you burn down your house. To change your job, go into a different career. Some sort of major change, something where you basically eliminate the possibility of the bad behavior happening. You're eating too much cake, you don't buy any cake, or you get rid of your refrigerator or something. You're having difficulty in a relationship and you just break the relationship. Now, of course, Krishna uses this with the whole cycle of birth and death. So Krishna is using this by having us go from one body to another, where things are just destroyed. He does this with the whole universe. It's explained in the Bhagavatam that Anantasesha, who's lying at the bottom of the universe, becomes disgusted with the behavior of the conditioned souls who are not surrendering to him. And in his disgust, he burns down the whole universe. Kind of like your house is dirty and you burn down your house. So that may be sometimes appropriate. So we're going to be looking at this list for each of the 8 So this is destroy the situation or shoot the animal. And we're going to be looking at the same situations for each of these 8. So if you're living with someone who leaves dirty laundry all over the place, then you change your roommates. You tell the person they have to leave. Okay? If you have a dog and it's barking all night in your backyard, you kill the animal, you sell it, you have its vocal cords cut by a veterinarian. If your kids are making too much noise in the car when you're driving, you make them walk home, or you make them take the bus, you get someone else to drive them. If your spouse comes home every day in a bad mood, you divorce your spouse. If you don't have a very good tennis swing, you stop playing tennis. If you have a lazy employee, you fire them. If you don't like to write thank you notes for presents, then you just don't write them, and then maybe people will stop sending you presents. If your cat jumps on your kitchen table, you keep the cat outside or you give it away. If a bus driver is rude to you, you get off that bus and take another one. If you have adult children who want to move in with you and you would think that they should not do so, just tell them that they can't move in with you and stick to your decision. So you can see that all of these, you have solved the problem. In some cases, you've created another problem. If you don't like the way you're playing tennis and you stop playing tennis, then you're not playing tennis anymore. If your spouse is in a bad mood and you divorce your spouse, then you don't have a spouse anymore. So these are very drastic solutions. And again, sometimes a drastic solution is needed. And this can also be true on a very small level. You know, it can be you lock up your phone in the morning until a certain time or something. You know, I have a friend who was spending too much time on social media sites, and so she got an app that restricted her ability to access those sites. So it's this kind of a solution. Okay, then the next we're looking at is punishment. This is also a favorite of people, that to punish others or to punish themselves for some bad behavior. And this is like Prabhupada says in 1968, he said, just like I have seen in San Francisco, they said that this tree is standing for 7,000 years. They stand up on the bench for 7,000 years. The boys are sometimes punished by the teachers in the school, stand up on the bench. So these trees are punished, stand up by nature's law. So when Srila Prabhupada went to school, instead of chairs, they had a bench. And if a child was causing a disturbance, then they'd have to stand up on top of the bench as a punishment. And we're seeing Krishna employs this in having living entities take the body of trees. We also punish ourselves when we have an inner voice that yells at us or that criticizes ourselves. So when we do something wrong and we start thinking, oh, you are a terrible person, you are a stupid fool, you never do anything right, how could you do such a terrible thing? That is a kind of punishment. Now, to understand what we mean by punishment, and here we see again Krishna punishing living beings in hell from the court of Yamaraj, we mean something that happens after the bad behavior is completed. So someone does something bad, and then that behavior is over, it's completed, and then there is some consequence which is uncomfortable or painful or difficult or unwanted for the person. So, you know, the child breaks something, the breaking the thing is over, it's finished, and then you say, okay, you have to take a time out, go to your room, stand in the corner, like that. So the thing about punishment is that all the power is with the punisher, because your own bad behavior or the bad behavior of the other person is completed. Now, punishment only works in situations where the benefit someone is getting from the bad behavior is very small, and the bad behavior is not a repeated habit. So the example that I like to give is one time in Hawaii, I was driving across the island. I was on what they call the saddle road that goes between the mountains. It's a small, very windy road. And right when I was beginning that drive, I got pulled over by the police for going too fast, and they gave me a fine of $125. Now that's quite a bit of money. And they told me this is a holiday weekend and we have a lot of police officers on this road. If you get stopped again for speeding, then you'll have to go to the courthouse and your car insurance will go up and so forth. So I decided to be extremely careful. Now on that road, there are parts of the road where you can drive at what would be a normal speed on a major road. And then there are parts of that road where, because of the curves, the posted speed limit is very slow. And most people don't slow down that much. But because I had just gotten a ticket, I was staying a little under the speed limit for the whole way home, which meant that there were generally a lot of cars backed up behind me because people weren't used to going that slowly. So in that case, the punishment worked because the reward that I got from driving a little too fast was a very small reward. I would get home 5 or 10 minutes earlier, and the punishment was very great. And it was not a general habit of mine. It was not an entrenched habit to drive at a certain speed. So that's the only time that punishment is effective. Generally, punishment simply makes the punished person angry at the punishing person and makes them want to find a way to do the bad behavior but not get caught. So it tends, instead of stopping bad behavior, it tends to encourage people to be more sneaky about their behavior. So let's look at this list. If your roommate leaves dirty laundry all over the place, you can yell at them. You can threaten that you will take away their clothes, and you do it. If your dog is barking in the yard all night, go out and hit the dog, spray the dog with water. And by the way, the dog may be so happy to see you that it doesn't care. This happens also sometimes with children, that sometimes if you yell at children who are being naughty, they're so happy that someone's paying attention to them at all that it may act as a kind of reward. Kids are too noisy in the car, yell at them, threaten them, hit them. Your spouse comes home in a bad mood, start a fight, burn the dinner, sulk and scold and cry. If you have a bad tennis swing, curse, get angry, criticize yourself whenever you do it wrong. If you have a lazy employee, scold them, criticize, especially in front of others, threaten to reduce their pay and do it, hating to write thank you notes, put it off and feel guilty at the same time. If your cat gets on the kitchen table, hit it or chase it out of the kitchen. If you have a rude bus driver, get the driver's number, complain to the company, try to get the person transferred or chastised or fired. If one of your grown children wants to move back in with you, let them move in, but then make them miserable the whole time that they. Okay, we're going to go now to negative reinforcement, which is something like punishment, but is a very different in an important way. So we've all experienced negative reinforcement in a car where there's a annoying beeping sound until we put our seatbelt in. So we get in the car and there's this beep, 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 beep. And as soon as we buckle our seatbelt, the noise goes away. Or if you can think, one child is hitting another child. So you take the hand, you grab the hand of the offending child and you hold their hand until they stop trying to hit the other child. And as soon as they stop trying to hit the other child, you let go of their hand. So the main difference between negative reinforcement and punishment is that the negative consequence happens during the time that the bad behavior is going on and stops as soon as the bad behavior stops. So in this way, it feels more under the control of the person doing the bad behavior rather than just under the control of the person giving the negative consequence. We see this, that if we touch something hot, immediately we move our hand away as soon as it's hot. Or we find this with Krishna in that we smell bad if we don't shower. And as soon as we shower, we smell good again, right? It's a negative reinforcement. Krishna is reinforcing cleanliness in us by we smell bad and we feel yucky and we feel dirty. And as soon as we get clean, then we feel good again. Looking at negative reinforcement in the same list, if our roommate leaves dirty laundry all over the place, maybe we disconnect the TV or Wi-Fi, or we don't have dinner until everything is picked up. And the note here is that in order for this to work, we want to reinforce even half-hearted attempts at the beginning. So if the person just starts picking up a little bit of laundry, then immediately we'll turn the Wi-Fi back on. A dog in our yard is barking at night. We shine a light on the dog when it's barking, and as soon as it stops barking, we turn it off. The kids are too noisy in the car. When it gets really loud, then we pull over and stop the car. And it's important when doing this not to be yelling at the kids because that's also noise. So just pulling over and quietly reading a book or chanting, and as soon as the kids get quiet, you drive on. If your spouse regularly comes home in a bad mood, you just turn your back and leave the room briefly as soon as their tone becomes disagreeable, and then as soon as they're silent or normal, return and give one's attention. If you have a bad tennis swing, have a coach or someone else correct the bad swing in the middle of the swing, like by saying or nope each time you do it. Develop another swing that shuts off the correction. A lazy employee, have tight supervision, and anytime their behavior goes below the standard, immediately correct them. Hating to write thank you notes, this negative reinforcement comes from the people who give you presents, who will complain to you that you haven't thanked them. If your cat is getting on your kitchen table, put some sticky tape on the table, and whenever the cat jumps on the table, it will feel the stickiness and want to get off. A rude bus driver, stand in the door or near the driver so that he can't drive on until you move, and move when he stops talking, even just for a moment. If you have an adult child who wants to move back in with you, let them move in, but charge them exactly what you would charge a stranger for rent, food, and any other services like laundry or babysitting, so that it's worth it for them to move on. The fourth one is extinction, patience, and faith. This is in one sense doing nothing, waiting for the bad behavior to go away on its own. In many cases, for those of us who are practicing bhakti yoga, bad behavior will go away without any extra effort at all. We've all seen this in ourselves, that some of our bad habits, some of our negative ways of thinking automatically go away by practicing bhakti without having to do anything additionally. And that's true for others as well. Even on a material level, some of the bad behavior of people just goes away as they get older and more mature. And in many cases, one can simply just wait, right? The way that when people are newly married, that they're behaving in public, which may not be that appropriate, it goes away after they're married for some time, right? And it's the same in general. So there are certain things that if we just wait, they go away. And this is, of course, something also that Krishna does. He's the witnesser in the heart, is described like two birds in a tree. And he just witnesses the conditioned soul engaging in materialistic activities, just waiting for that soul to turn to him. So again, this is appropriate for some things. The roommate leaves dirty laundry all over the place. Just wait for them to grow up. Your dog is barking in the yard all night. Extinction doesn't usually work for this because the dog is enjoying the barking and therefore it's tending to reinforce itself. If your kids are too noisy in the car, just ignore it. Eventually they'll get tired of it and be quiet. Spouse comes home in a bad mood, just simply ignore it. Don't have a positive or negative response to it. A faulty tennis swing, work on other strokes and footwork, and just stop concentrating or thinking about that particular tennis swing. Whatever we think about tends to increase whatever we give our attention to. And so sometimes simply not giving attention to the bad behavior, but giving attention to other things can be very effective. A lazy employee, if their misbehavior is a way of getting attention, remove the attention, but their laziness can also be self-reinforcing and therefore not be amenable to this method. Hating to write thank you notes, generally as we get older, we become more appreciative of gifts and we become more appreciative of writing thank you notes as opposed to paying bills and taxes. So we tend to enjoy doing it more naturally. Cat gets on the kitchen table, ignore it and just simply decide you're going to tolerate it. A rude bus driver, ignore the driver, pay your fare, and forget about it. An adult offspring who moves back in with you, figure it's temporary and that they have enough motivation to move on. Definitely, this method should be used for some sorts of bad behavior some of the time, keeping in mind that what we pay attention to tends to increase just by virtue of paying attention to it. Now we're going to go to the 4 that are considered more positive, although, again, any of these can be used in various situations. So this is training an incompatible behavior. Training ourselves in a behavior in which the bad behavior cannot coexist. Now, one way we can do this is through detachment. All of our bad, if this is particularly true when referring to bad behavior in ourselves, all of our bad behavior comes from being attached to trying to enjoy something in this world. If we train ourselves in detachment, we cannot also act in attachment. So this concept is very nicely explained throughout the Shastra. One of my favorite is in Bhagavad Gita 14:22, where Krishna says, one who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active. So when the impetus comes for us to do the thing that we know is not good for us to do, we remain a neutral observer. Oh, that's simply the modes acting. I don't need to respond. Krishna talks about this in Bhagavad Gita 270, to not be disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled, but is always still. Such a person alone can achieve peace, and not the person who strives to satisfy such desires. So if we cultivate this mood of detachment from our thoughts, our material emotions, our material desires, and of course, if we're dealing with bad behavior in others, if we train them to be detached and have the mood of a disinterested observer, not attachment or aversion, then the bad behaviors based on our material attachments and desires will also cease because the fuel for them goes away. On an external practical level, we can do something or have the other person do something where they cannot be doing the bad thing at the same time. You know, if our kids are spending too much time or whatever, any time playing video games, we can engage them in some Krishna conscious activity during the time that they are most likely to play video games. And I know one family where the children were spending lots of time on their phones and tablets, and the parents engaged them in different sports and different things that got them out of the house and away from their gadgets, where, you know, they just couldn't be practicing swimming and be spacing out on their devices at the same time. And we can do this for ourselves, especially if we think about, you know, well, what is it, at what time or what place am I likely to do this bad behavior? We could think of all of the things that we could do instead. And again, things that make the bad behavior impossible to do at the same time. One way that we can do this is suggested by Bhaktivinoda, and that is to take a vow. And we can start with taking a vow even for 3 days and see how it works. So for these 3 days, whenever I want to do such and such, I will do something else instead. And the mind can accept, 3 days is not too much. The mind can accept that almost anything for 3 days. And then we see how it goes. And then we may say, okay, well, now I'll take that vow for a week, or I'll take that vow for 2 weeks, and so forth. Now, of course, Krishna uses this method in the Shastra, where he engages human beings in positive, beneficial activities that don't leave time and energy to do negative activities. You know, if I'm spending my time in reading the Shastra, and I'm spending my time in worship, I'm spending my time in chanting and giving charity and so forth, then I'm not going to have time to do other things. I won't be able to do other things. If I'm earning an honest livelihood, I won't be able to be doing criminal activity at the same time. So again, looking at our list, for a roommate who leaves dirty laundry all over the place, so get a laundry basket and wash the laundry together, making it something social whenever the basket is full. So get a mood of laundry care. One thing that I suggested once to a family that was very effective, the children were regularly speaking in a nasty way to each other, insulting each other. And we got a reward system where the children would anonymously put a marker. I don't know how to explain this very quickly, but all the children's names were up on a board, and the child could put a marker under another child's name whenever that child was polite. And then at the end of the day, we give some little treat like raisins or something to whoever had the most markers. And so the children were trained to notice politeness in their brothers and sisters and to reward it. And naturally, because they were doing this, they were not being rude to each other. A dog in the yard barks all night, so train the dog to lie down on command. Dogs, like people, usually don't bark when they're lying down. And so whenever the dog starts to bark, tell it to lie down and then praise the dog for lying down. Kids are too noisy in the car. Sing songs, tell stories, play games. And because they're so busy singing songs and playing games, they're not going to be yelling and screaming. Spouse comes home in a bad mood, have some pleasant activity that happens as soon as the spouse comes home that's incompatible with complaining. Maybe playing with the children, working on a hobby, or maybe just a half an hour that the spouse spends by themselves. I was reading about one man who did this for himself, that on his way home from work every day, he would stop at a park before he got home and he'd read a little paper he had written about what were his goals as a husband and a father. And when he would go to work, he would do the same thing. What were his goals at work? And in this way, he was training an incompatible behavior. A faulty tennis swing, so train yourself in a new swing, a completely different swing from scratch. A lazy employee, order that person to work quicker or harder on a specific task, watch and praise the job when it's completed. Aiding to write thank you notes, so train a replacement behavior. Maybe if for checks, write something on the back of the check, or maybe call the person up on the phone, send them a text message. Cat gets up on the kitchen table, train the cat to get on a chair in the kitchen and give them a reward. And an eager cat may jump on that chair so hard it pushes it across the room, but the cat is on the chair and not on the table. A rude bus driver, look at the person, smile, and say good morning. And if the person's really rude, just say, well, you must have a hard job. An adult child who wants to move back into the house, help them find another place to live, even if you have to pay for it in the beginning. Now this next one is a very interesting way of dealing with bad behavior. It's something that people tend to resist doing. They have a sort of an inclination to think that this should not be done. But it's very effective, and like all of these, is used by Krishna himself. In fact, just the other day, I was listening to Srila Prabhupada talk about this very technique used by Krishna. This technique is where you say, okay, this behavior is not good, but you can do it under these circumstances. What I was hearing Srila Prabhupada talk about was how the Vedas have facility for people who want to eat meat. That, okay, you can kill a certain kind of animal in a certain way once in a month before the goddess Kali, and then you can eat meat. Now, the reason that this technique works is several things. First of all, a lot of the reason that people do bad behavior is for the thrill of being rebellious. All of us conditioned souls are in this material world because we want to rebel against God. So a lot of our impetus, a lot of our motivation to do things that are wrong is that we feel, oh yes, I am a rebel. When the bad behavior is allowed at a certain time, it removes a lot of the impetus for that behavior. Now, we all use this technique with children. Like in a school, you tell the children, okay, when we ring the bell at this time, you can go outside and run and scream as much as you like. And when we ring the bell again, then you have to come back in and sit down for class. So it's something that we understand that can be used that way. I know of a married couple, actually more than one, who used this technique very successfully for dealing with the fact that they were arguing with each other a lot. They set a time of day, I think it was from 6 to 7 at night, for arguing, and they said, whatever disagreements we have during the day, we'll only argue about them between 6 and 7 at night. And so then they had to do it. Then they'd sit down at 6 o'clock and say, okay, what do you want to argue about? And then as soon as 7 o'clock came, they would stop arguing. Now, of course, to get rid of a bad behavior entirely, you want to give the cue less and less and less. So you could start having an arguing time every day for an hour, and maybe after a month, you make it 3 times a week. And maybe after another month, you make it once a week. And then after a while, you make it once a month. And so forth. And without the cue, without the stimulus, the behavior tends to go away. One can do this with one's own mind. Like if your mind is wandering during your japa, you can, with things you're worried about, maybe you can say, all right, after breakfast, for 10 minutes, we'll sit down and worry about whatever you want to worry about. And then you have to do it. You have to sit down and say, okay, mind, what do you want to think about now? But don't bother me during my japa. And of course, such a thing is used by the Lord, as we said, the idea that you can eat certain kinds of meat. Prabhupada gives the example of marriage. If you want to have sex, you can get married and so forth. So there's drinking of wine is allowed in the scriptures for certain people at certain times, certain places. So this is definitely something that Krishna also does. Looking at our list, so leaving dirty laundry all over the place, have a laundry fight. See how big of a mess you can make throwing your dirty laundry around. Your dog in the yard barks all night. Train the dog to bark on command for a food reward. And when you don't give the command, the dog will not bother barking. An interesting true story in this regard is that a person who owned a shop, and some of the neighborhood kids after school, to cause trouble, would go outside his shop and they would harass the customers. So the owner of the shop went out to these kids and said, I'm going to pay 25 cents to anybody who does a really good job of harassing my customers, but only between 3 and 4 in the afternoon. So the kids would show up between 3 and 4 in the afternoon, and they would harass the customers and get paid 25 cents. It's a true story. And after a couple weeks of this, the shopkeeper said, I'm not getting as many customers anymore, so now I can only pay you 10 cents to harass them between 3 and 4. And he did this for a while, and after a while he said, now I can only afford 5 cents. And the kids said, well, this isn't worth doing for 5 cents. And so they left. Kids are too noisy in the car. So put noise making under stimulus control, like say, okay, everybody, let's make noise, go. I've also seen parents do this with children who are screaming for whatever, they want a cookie or they want a toy. You can see some of this on their videos where the child is screaming, and then the father says, okay, now it's my turn to scream. You be quiet, now it's my turn. And the father goes, and then the father looks at the mother and says, okay, mother, your turn. And the mother goes, and then the father says to the child, okay, now it's your turn to scream. And the child goes, no. A spouse coming home in a bad mood, set a time and a signal for grouching and complaining. And during that time, reinforce all complaining with full attention and sympathy and ignore complaining before or after. A bad tennis swing, if you told yourself to hit the ball wrong and learn to do it on purpose, would the fault tend to go away when you did not give the command? It might. A lazy employee, have a scheduled goof-off time. And this is an amazingly effective technique. There are some companies that tell their employees, spend 20% of your time working on your own projects. And then they often ask the employees to report on their own projects to the rest of the group. Hating to write thank you notes, buy a memo pad, note paper, stamps, a pen, address book, a red box. Put the supplies inside the box. When you get a present, write the donor's name on the memo pad, put it on the box, put the red box on your pillow or dinner plate, and don't sleep or eat until you've written the letter and sealed, stamped, and mail it. A cat gets on the kitchen table. Train the cat to get on the kitchen table and to get off the kitchen table on a command. Then you can start decreasing the time when you give the command to jump on the table until you stop giving it completely. All right, for a nasty bus driver, we do not recommend you put this behavior on cue. For your adult children, as soon as they've left home the first time, invite them back for visits, making it clear that they should come only when you invite them, and do not invite them to move in. Okay, shaping the absence of the behavior. So this is rewarding whenever the behavior is absent. And it's important to reward even very small and slight absences of the behavior. If your kids are fighting and then they stop fighting even for a moment, just even to say, oh, that's great. Wow, that's wonderful. Right? If you've paid attention to your japa just for 2 minutes, and just even self-reward can be as simple as just going, yay, whoa. Or if other people are around, you can just, silently. That is definitely a reward. Now, one of the reasons that we resist doing this very effective technique is that we tend to think that if someone has done a bad behavior, especially for a long time or repeated behavior, that they should be completely and absolutely free of that bad behavior for a long period of time before it's rewarded. However, doing that is very discouraging to the person who has been doing the bad behavior, even if that person is ourselves. Rather, what we want to do is reward the tiniest steps where there's an absence of the behavior. We want to reward baby steps. So, if you play video games for only a half an hour instead of an hour, you can give yourself a little happy dance, right? If there's anything that stops even for a short period of time, just immediately it can be as simple as a smile as a reward. And of course, Krishna does this. He gives a positive reaction to people who do the right thing, even if otherwise they're doing the wrong thing. Even people who are normally doing the wrong thing, as soon as they stop doing the wrong thing, he gives immediately some reaction. And we find this even internally. Right? As soon as I give up my anger or fault finding, even for a moment, I feel a sense of peace, isn't it? Yes, we get some immediate response from the Lord. So looking at our list, leaving dirty laundry all over the place, have special sweets, or invite over good friends whenever the quarters are tidy or the roommate does the laundry. And the dog in the yard is barking all night. So if the dog's been quiet for 10 minutes, go and give the dog a reward. After a while, make it 20 minutes. After a while, make it an hour, and so on. The kids are too noisy in the car. So as soon as they're quiet, you say, oh, wow, you've all been so quiet. Let's stop at Govinda's. Of course, you have to be right by a Govinda's to do that. Or maybe you have some treats or surprises with you, and you say, oh, you've all been so quiet, and you give them some treat or some surprise. Spouse comes home in a bad mood. Think of something that would really be a reward for your spouse, and do that whenever your spouse doesn't come home in a bad mood. Again, it could be something as simple as a smile or a hug, or there is some special food that you have for them. A faulty tennis swing. Ignore the bad shots and praise yourself for the good ones. This really works, and it's something that we can do with ourselves in general. So instead of a negative reinforcement or punishing ourselves with this inner voice, criticizing ourselves when we do something wrong, we can be silent at the wrong things. And when we're not doing the wrong things, as soon as we do the right things, then we can go, wow, you did it. That's just a little inner voice. You did it, even just for a moment. And if the other voice comes in and says, well, it was only for a moment, then we just ignore that. We just ignore that and continue to praise ourselves for when we do it right. A lazy employee, really praise them whenever they do a job that is satisfactory. And you don't have to keep this up forever. Hating to write thank you notes. Whenever you get a present and promptly write a thank you note, then treat yourself to something that you really like. Cat gets up on the kitchen table. The only way that you can reward your cat for staying off the table is if you can normally close the door to the kitchen or your cat stays outside when you're not home. A rude bus driver, so a pleasant good morning or even a flower or a soft drink when they're not being rude should change their behavior in a week or two. And yes, you do have to be patient with shaping the absence of the behavior. It's not going to change a bad behavior immediately. It may take time. I really like this last one, a grown child who wants to move in with you. One way that you can prevent this is that when your children first move out of the home, that you praise them for the way they take care of their house. You praise them for their choice of friends. You praise them for what they're doing. You don't criticize them. If you criticize how they're living, then they may think, well, yeah, it's better living back with my parents, and they'll move back in. And our last one, which is the only one that gets to the absolute root of the problem, and this is changing the motivation. Finding out what pleasure one is getting from the bad behavior and getting that pleasure in a better way. So to do this on the spiritual level requires changing our identity. Instead of identifying with the body and this world and looking for pleasure in the senses and the things of this world, we look for pleasure as Krishna's servant. Now, I find that although this is the ultimate solution, that this is a solution that many people, including many devotees, tend to resist because it involves identifying how I am trying to enjoy a bad behavior or how someone else whose bad behavior I'd like to affect is enjoying the bad behavior. Srila Prabhupada writes in the preface to the Nectar of Devotion that everything everyone does is motivated by a desire to enjoy rasa. So, of course, there are the 5 primary rasas, right? There's adoration, serving, friendship, parenthood, and romantic. There's also the 7 secondary rasas, comedy or joy, wonder, compassion or sadness. Yes, we enjoy sadness. That's why people go to sad movies where they cry. Fear. Yes, we enjoy fear. That's why people do scary sports or scary amusement park rides. Anger. Yes, we enjoy anger. That's why people go to political rallies and sporting events. Disgust. Again, people enjoy being disgusted at what the latest politician has done or the latest movie star has done. Oh, that's so horrible. Or, what someone in your community has done. And then sportsmanship or chivalry, which includes giving of charity and being a very good person. So these are all ways in which we try to enjoy the world separately from Krishna. And being motivated by these enjoyments, we engage in bad behavior. So it's difficult often to want to identify how one is trying to enjoy something that's bad for them. We want to have this illusion that, well, the person doesn't really want to do that, or I don't really want to do that. But if we're doing something, it's because we do want to do it. And then find how we can get that same flavor in Krishna's service, how we can take the same thing that we're wanting to enjoy separately from Krishna, and how we can enjoy that with Krishna, how we can enjoy that in Krishna consciousness. And of course, this method is the ultimate one that Krishna uses by incarnating over and over again in the material world and showing us what is the real rasa. And going through our list again, if your roommate leaves dirty laundry all over the house, hire a servant to do the laundry. A dog in the yard barks all night. Figure the dog's lonely. Maybe give them a lot more attention during the day. Get another dog to keep the dog company. Kids are too noisy in the car. Maybe they're bored. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe you need to have more frequent stops. The spouse comes home in a bad mood. Maybe they need a new job. Maybe they need to eat as soon as they come in the door. Maybe right after work, they need some kind of fresh air and exercise. Faulty tennis swing, play for fun instead of for competition. A lazy employee, pay for the work instead of by the hours. Hating to write thank you notes. So here, just do something simple and do it on time rather than do something fancy. Cat gets on the kitchen table, so give them another place where they can jump up and get food and see things from a high place, where you can pet the cat and give it something to eat. A rude bus driver, so make sure that you have your change ready, know where you're going, don't block the aisle, don't mumble questions, be sympathetic. An adult offspring who wants to move back in with you. So from the time that they're children, give them a lot of friends, good self-esteem, a good purpose in life, train them to have some kind of livelihood, train them in life skills, and in that way, they'll be more likely to be able to get their own place. So we've gone through these 8 ways to destroy the situation: punishment, negative reinforcement, extinction or patience, training in incompatible behavior, putting the problem on cue, rewarding small steps of absence, and changing the motivation. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.